Good morning, and thank you so much for taking the time out today to join us for this third and final webinar with the theme, The Business of Charity. So our objective through these webinars has been to start a dialogue that might help us to understand and fill the gap that exists between the region's charities and the business sector, and most importantly, to work out what we're going to do about it. So by way of housekeeping, please post any questions you have for the panel during the conversation into the Ask a Question panel. I'll do my best to feed those into the discussion as we go along, and we will be recording the session today, so if you prefer not to use your name when reading out the question, or when we read out your question, please say so when you pose the question, and we'll leave that anonymous. So I'm Jayne Graham. I'm the Commercial Director of Citizens Advice Gateshead and Executive Director of our social enterprise trading subsidiary, which is called Society Matters KIC. I'm joined today by Stuart Fearn MBE, who's Head of Customer Contact at Newcastle Building Society, who both on a personal level and through Newcastle Building Society has made a significant commitment to community development and poverty alleviation. So welcome to you, Stuart. We also have Steve Beharall, Head of Newcastle United Foundation, recently named North East Charity of the Year. Congratulations for that, Steve. Ivan Jepson, who is Director of Business Development at Gateshead College and formerly worked for many years with Northumbrian Water. And last but of course not least, Alison Dunn, my boss and CEO of Citizens Advice Gateshead since 2012, during which time she has led its growth from 1.4 million to almost 5 million turnover this year, now employing over 180 staff, driven by her passion for social justice and a determination to challenge the persistence of poverty and inequality. Alison has recently also been announced as the chair of VON, the Voluntary Organisations Network North East. So congratulations on your appointment, Alison, and welcome to you all. So thank you very much, all of you, for joining us this morning. It's been a really interesting discussion so far. In the first webinar, our panellists talk about why the charity order book is always full. Why charities are growing to respond to that. And what emerged from that was the key point that as public services infrastructure continues to contract, the charity sector continues to fill the slack, with the challenge that there's no obvious or easy way to fund that expansion. In fact, the charities are having to increasingly compete against each other to find a way to make it ends meet. And this was simply taking out even more capacity from the work that they were actually needing to do. So the second discussion was about the economics of social value. It was really interesting to hear from two charities about their complex business models and the risks associated with that, but also how much they were contributing to the local economy, not only as an employer, between them hundreds of people, but also through the work with local people that they were doing through their charitable activities. Alison explained that Citizens Advice Gateshead's public value came to tens of millions every year, but at a personalised level, extra money in pockets in just 1 year of activity came to an eye-watering £9 million for the 15,000 or so people supported last year. So obviously that's above social impact. Over 70% of our audience members were actually surprised at the size of the economic impact being made. But it was also clear through the discussion that much more could be achieved with more resource. And that charities actually across the community and voluntary sector, large and small, are facing really significant challenges, greater than ever before. So today's discussion brings us to looking at one of the solutions for the gap we identified in those first two sessions, with the catchy title of Partnerships, Mutual Partnerships in Social Change. And I thought I'd start us off with a Jim Collins concept that James Ramsboth from CBE kindly posed us at the end of the last session, and that was the genius of the and versus the tyranny of the or. And James challenged us to find a way for charity and businesses to work together, recognising that alone they can never achieve as much as they can, working together with a shared purpose for the benefit of us all. So panellists, this is your quest for today's discussion. So can I start with you, Alison? The government's flagship policy, the Big Society, a decade ago, sort of about the time you became chief exec of Citizens Advice Gateshead, And that talked about the need to bridge the gap between the third sector and the private sector, amongst other things. As we established last time, charities are businesses too. Do you think this sector narrative creates a bit of an artificial line that suggests that ownership for social change maybe lies outside of the remit of business? And also, in the past 10 years, what change have you seen?
So we've certainly seen the failure of the big society, Jane, as it was imagined by the government of the time, and that's because it was a top-down initiative, and to succeed it needed power to be pushed down to communities, and that never happened. It was also driven by an agenda of shrinking the state as a response to austerity. We've had a decade of government drawing as much as it possibly can back from supporting civil society and tackling social problems. If we think about the situation in Gateshead, for example, we've had 120 million taken out of local government, with a further 63 million to come. So people and businesses didn't respond to this agenda in the way that the government of the time intended them to. And at the same time, charities, their budgets and their ability to respond came under enormous pressure as the sector's infrastructure was eroded over the course of a decade. So there wasn't really the positive response from business or from the charitable sector or from society, communities that the government had intended. But more recently, as a result of COVID-19, of racial reckoning, of things like the LGBTQ, Me Too, Say Her Name movements, we've seen a real resurgence in a different type of big society, one that's been created by the people for the people, and that's been transformational. It transforms how we feel about society, about our place in it, but also how we as consumers feel about businesses, where we spend and earn our money, and how businesses perceive their role in shaping society. And we've seen a big increase in the last 5 years with many, many more businesses demonstrating purposeful leadership, increased social responsibility. We've had the ESG strategy and a lot of businesses seeking out B Corp credentials. So we've got a different type of big society, but we definitely have a big society.
Interesting. So top down, not so much. Bottom up, more impactful. Steve, your experience, how integral have business partnerships been to you as a charity? Being named Northeast Charity of the Year this year, do you think? And what could have been even better for us to be able to work on? I think you're on mute, Steve.
Typical. Start again.
We're there.
Look, we're really proud of being Charity of the Year. Something that is really important to us to be recognised in the sector across our region. I think probably to answer the question, I think we're recognised for a couple of things. One was around our ability to leverage millions of pounds of grants and funds and investment from the UK and some of it international into the region, and around our response to COVID. And the third sector was crucial and really stepped up during the pandemic. And I think a lot of other third sector organisations like ours got a real chance to live their mission and purpose and vision. But I suppose in terms of business partnerships and our work, I suppose it's a couple of things for us, really, Jane. It's around, since 2008, we've had a track record of supporting other organisations deliver their CSR strategies. And we currently work with about 150 different businesses on it. Probably two things. One around our flagship New Futures programme, which is about employability and industry opportunities, and a little bit around fundraising. I suppose that really certainly over the last year, but the last 5 years, it's been working with public, private and voluntary sector to help us raise the capital for our new home, Newcastle. So, big organisations like Newcastle Building Society or the LEP or Combined Authority. We've worked with the Beharall Family Cloth Workers Foundation in Newcastle College. So really, a lot of our focus of work with businesses has been around capital, but also some revenue. And I mean, we'll touch on it in a bit later on around cash is king, but it hasn't all been about the cash.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think, obviously the experience that you have working within the, obviously with corporate partnerships with businesses demonstrates that sort of point that Alison was making. It is, people are taking ownership. I think it's really interesting looking at this from a different perspective. So I thought we'd move on to yourself, Stuart. It's evident that social purpose is fundamental to Newcastle Building Society. I've seen that over the last 12 or 18 months. Can you talk that through for us? I suppose the obvious starting question is why? And what help could you offer other businesses that maybe aspire to take your lead but aren't quite sure how to do that?
Well, I think to start with, Newcastle Building Society we see ourselves as a community organisation anyway. So straight away we're a community organisation. We may also be, you know, we are a commercial organisation too. However, what we definitely are is very much purpose driven. And I think the fact is, being purpose driven, as long as the purpose is correct, I think that's the key. Now, our purpose is connecting communities with a better financial future. Now, as a result of that, that's kind of key to what we look at. Now, underneath that, we have many different pillars, but the key to it is we started, 160 years ago, helping people save and buy their own home. That's not changed. It's exactly the same today. But the fact is, we still see our responsibilities going a bit further than that. So our ability, we have resources, we're sat in the middle of the community, we can help, whether it be charities or community groups in many different ways, and we try to support people to live better lives in some ways. That similar fits with how you sit in the advice talk about it. We try to do it through our community foundation fund. But we also do it with our staff. We provide, you know, put our staff out there to support organisations, charities, and connect people. And we work with Newcastle United, helping them with their New Futures programme. And so it becomes more than just money, it's people as well. And as a result of all of that, we're developing great careers for the people who work for us, and we're developing great people who are connected very much into the community and doing good. And when you talk about how can we help other people, I suppose have a very certain purpose to start with, create that purpose. We talk about CSR quite often, and Newcastle Building Society very much doesn't see us as being a CSR organisation. We just follow our purpose, and we're led by our purpose in everything that we do. And I think if people could do the same thing, it's definitely made a huge difference to us. I mean, Andrew, our chief exec, very much reset our purpose probably about 5 years ago. And everything we do comes back all the time to this purpose, everything we do.
I think it's an interesting point. Let's talk about CSR policies, because I'm sure there are many that are either sat on a shelf collecting dust or on a website with a commitment, but actually, is that the tick box as opposed to the intent, the absolute intent? And I think it's an interesting one. What's your position on that, Steve? Because you were saying that obviously Newcastle United Foundation helps people to deliver their CSR policy. Is it because they've got a CSR policy, or is it because they have a commitment to social change?
Well, I think it's a couple of things really. I think, I suppose if I'm listening to this podcast now, I'll be thinking, well, you know, we're not Newcastle United Foundation, so that access will be very different. And I think what Stuart's talking about there is there's a different way to connect with an organisation, whether it's around, he's talking about purpose and values there. We are thinking about products. We're thinking about expertise, particularly expertise coming from the profit sector to the not-for-profit sector, communication platforms, networks. I think that's where the third sector can connect with businesses, whether they're big or small, in terms of social purpose. But I think if we were to look 10 years ago in terms of who was producing the CSR report, I would imagine, I don't know what the numbers are, but I would imagine it's significantly bigger now. So I know we've had a quick chat on Friday. I think consumers now, I think it's a safe assumption that consumers now want to work with companies who are trying to do good things for society. And that is just the status quo now. That's not going to go away, particularly with younger consumers, in terms of they want us to help. The consumers want us to fix their problem, but they also want to fix society's problems. So I think whilst Stuart and Newcastle Building Society won't talk about it as CSR, it's the shoe in the door to have a conversation about profit and not-for-profit, and how the two can work together around social impact and social value.
Jane, I
Thanks.
think it's fair to, sorry,
yes,
I just think it's fair to say that those that have a CSR policy that is gathering dust on a shelf are much more easily exposed in the current climate in which we're living than ever before, because we have 24-hour social media, we have employees who are much more socially driven now. So if you ask an employee, does your company have a CSR policy and are they living by those values, they'll answer honestly, and it'll be on social media. So that there are two types. There are those that have a policy, and there are those like the Newcastle Building Society for which this is absolutely embedded, and that's the standard that we're hoping to drive by having these conversations.
Yeah, thanks, Alison. That tees up very nicely our audience participation opportunity. We would like you to participate in a poll. Do you think your current employer is doing as much as it can to enable social change? Yes, no, or don't know. So the poll will come on the screen now. There it is. Do you think your current employer is doing as much as it can to enable social change? Yes, no, don't know. And we'll give you a couple of extra seconds just to vote there, and then we'll be able to see the results. Obviously, there's a real mixed group of people attending the webinar, so it'll be interesting to see overall what their position is. Okay. Is everybody finished there? Just pull the results on now. Okay, so this is extremely encouraging. 80% believe that their current employer is doing as much as it can to enable social change. And 15% say no, 5% say don't know. Obviously, as I say, there's a real array of different types of organisations, including charities as well as businesses in the audience, but that's very encouraging. Ivan, in your role with Gateshead College, I think possibly the audience are less familiar with the fact that Gateshead College is in fact a charity. And you no doubt spend a lot of time in your role engaging with businesses. So what challenges do you face working with the business sector? And also, to what extent does your long career prior to being with Gateshead College with Northumbrian Water, which obviously is an organisation with a high profile social conscience and purposeful leadership, how does that influence your engagement with business now?
Yeah, thanks, Jane. I've been really fortunate to have a long career, as you say. It may not look as though I'm still only 30, but it was over 20 odd years with Northumbrian Water, and here with Gateshead. There's one common thing I think in both those organisations is that it's about the leadership and values in those organisations. And I think both to Stuart and Steve's point, definitely a strong belief that financial performance is only one measure. And you have to understand your impact on the environment, society, and employees. And I think that has to be driven from the top and from within the organisation. But what I find at the moment is that the wide range of businesses that Steve talks about, from large businesses who have an infrastructure who can look to plan and engage with this with this movement, versus those smaller and medium businesses who are in effect looking at the here and now and the challenges that they have in their own organisations. So it's a real mixture, but I think that the common influence is, as organisations, is driving that leadership and being the enabler to do, I call it just to do the right thing. And I think profitability can go hand in hand with social change. And there are organisations there that want to do it but don't know how, and that's where the likes of Steve, Stuart, and others can come in. And I think we just have to take personal responsibility in all the employers I deal with at the moment. It's trying to aid them and guide and provide some additional support so that they can look to develop their businesses. Initially, at the moment, I'm prioritising new skills, but acting as a trusted partner and showing the way. I mean, I've got numerous examples we might touch upon later on, but the support is out there.
What are the challenges then associated with that? Because they must be real challenges, because clearly as a charity ourselves, it's Advice Gateshead, this is something that we really struggle with. If it's not all about profit, you don't have to impact your profit to have a social purpose or to be purposeful in terms of how you actually lead your organisation. What challenges are businesses going to face then? What challenges does Newcastle Building Society, for example, face, Stuart, in light of this conversation? It can't be that easy.
I don't think it's easy, but I think organisations like ourselves we've got to finally balance what we do as a business and what we do in terms of socially. But I think with good management, we're looking at everything all of the time. We've got to be on top of things all of the time. But I think an organisation like ourselves, what we've been able to do is recruit people into the business that have got a strong view socially to start with. You know, we've got people that come into the business who want to impact the region. They don't just want to do a job, come to work and do a job. So they naturally want to get involved in things. And I've seen that for myself the last few years. You know, the organisation is a far better organisation than the one it was. You know, for something so old, particularly on young people we bring into our business now as well. People do join us for the type of business we are. As a result of that, it's just self-fulfilling. We're becoming a better organisation all the time, and then when we put our efforts and even money, you know, you asked me a question the other day about how do you balance trying to get the commercial side of a business right with what you do socially. Well, like I said, it's a fine balance. But however, when colleagues themselves are funding into our community fund to help regionally what's going on, that's already a success, isn't it? And that won't change, I don't think. So I just think we've just got to find it's a fine balance, but well managed, and that's it.
Alison, your thoughts around, I'm interested to hear what you think around this sort of, there is a distance, despite the intent, there is this distance between societal issues and employers. Yet, I think I've heard you talk before about the number of people that we support that are actually employed themselves. So what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so I mean, we know that about 50 to 60% of everyone that seeks help from Citizens Advice nationally comes from a household where there's at least one person in full-time paid employment. So they're coming to us because they're experiencing the hardships of life at the moment. So things, you know, they all have, not all, but they were coming with sorts of inquiries around housing issues. They've got debt problems, they've got relationship problems, caring responsibilities, they're accessing benefits to top up their wages. So the idea that these people are not sat in workforces but sat in our reception area is simply not true. You know, the very people who are coming to work in businesses are the same people that are coming into the charitable sector looking for support. So actually working with business to get direct access to the charitable services that business needs has to create a win-win for everyone.
We've got a question here actually from Dean Titterton, who asks, regarding the first poll question, that was when we were asking around, do we think the current employer is doing as much as it can to enable social change? He's asking, saying regarding the first poll question, it depends really on what good looks like. Sometimes we only know what we know, which is absolutely a fair point, Dean. I think it is about, I suppose, our expectations of good. So what you're talking about here, Alison, is obviously where we're talking about within the actual services that we're delivering. A lot of those people who are receiving those services, you mentioned 50 to 60% have people in their household. I think from last year's stats for Citizens Advice Gateshead, I think it was almost 30% were actually employed or self-employed themselves, the people who were actually seeking advice. So I think there's sort of this, the point that Dean just made about what good looks like. I think it's also about recognising from a business perspective why businesses want to get engaged, and it needs to be beyond a sort of general social purpose. It has to be about the realities of the society that employer is sat within. What are your thoughts on that?
So to give you an example of that, you know, we will sometimes get contact from businesses who tell us that they, as part of their corporate social responsibility, that they're setting up food banks to support employees who possibly are struggling financially. That's not good enough. If we've got employees who are struggling financially, setting up a food bank to respond to that problem is not the good that Dean's talking about in his question. The good that Dean would be talking about in his question is making sure that those wages provide a real living wage for people and that they're able to sustain their employment. One of the difficulties we have, particularly in the northeast of England, is that we have a lot of very low income, unsustainable employment. We have a lot of people, again, coming into our service who are holding down 2 or 3 jobs, which is an incredibly complex complex scenario for any household to manage. You've got 3 sets of employers to manage, 3 sets of policies and processes to manage, 3 sets of attendance management, 3 different sets of holidays. These are really complicated situations. They can't be solved alone by a food bank. It requires government policy to drive that type of change.
I think what's also required, though, Alison, is good conversation between the charity sector and business. Though, because I think there's some specialist knowledge in there. There's a skill, our business is mortgages and savings and financial advice, but your business is that. And I think if 2 organisations are talking to one another, and this is the shared understanding, I think that's the starting point of business and charities working well together, understanding what the real issues are and how to try to resolve them. I think that's really important.
That's really valid,
Jayne.
because we heard Steve talk earlier about, businesses bringing their skills into the voluntary sector, but actually the voluntary sector has a lot of skill, a lot of insight, a lot of evidence that it can take into business, and that's one of the things that we're starting to develop through our trading arm, Society Matters. But I realised that I cut across you, Ivan, so please do come in.
Yeah, just a very quick example. I mean, I know this goes back to my time with the water company, but about 10 years ago, there was a recognition that there was in isolation, we were trying to tackle the issue of people having trouble with paying their water bill. Now, if you're having trouble paying your water bill, you're going to be having trouble across your financial management strategies. So we're not expert. We weren't experts in that. So we engaged with Step Change and brought them in to manage the whole, from a holistic point of view, working with individuals to bring financial management plans in, to work with them with their creditors that they've got, and it tried to put them on a sort of a foothold. But we're not the experts at that. And I think that's Stuart's point, is business and charitable partners and other collaborations can come together. And I think as a region, we can do that. We have got leaders and people in this region. There's a number of us on the call here today who will do that.
It's interesting. One of the somebody's made a comment or a question for us. Are you aware of any training that leaders, businesses can take to help develop their CSR policy that you mentioned, maybe action to their fullest extent? So I think first of all, I will respond yes. Society Matters Community Interest Company, which is a trading subsidiary of Citizens Advice Gateshead, provides support to organisations in helping them to create corporate social action and to bring their policies to life. However, that advert, I will pause now. Any thoughts? Because obviously this really is about development. This conversation is about helping to raise awareness and understanding amongst the business community, as well as obviously to support the charity sector. So, Stuart, what are your thoughts on that, or Steve?
Well, a really quick one for me. I just think this is the point. I think the point is there are organisations that are probably doing it well, and I think, but the way to share that is connecting to one another. And I think just a conversation, on this call, I think some of us have only met for the first time recently, and even that connection, myself and Ivan met a week or so ago, and immediately we realised there's so much potential of knowledge between us, the organisations, there's something we can share, and I think organisations connecting together is key, really.
I suppose, Jayne, just on that, I think, there are some huge societal challenges across our region, many which are political, and business isn't responsible for all of them, and neither are the third sector. But I suppose part of my feeling is that there's more businesses that could be in this space. And I think part of that conversation is, how do we get some businesses in the book in the first place, which is around social action and social responsibility, and then on the same page. And I think for some businesses, it's looking beyond the metrics. So not all employees are in love with the metric, but they can connect with the CSR mission above that. So I think that's I think that empowers a workforce to have more of a sense of identity with its workplace. So that somebody more clever than me needs to work out that being involved seriously in social action will help your bottom line. And they'll be out there somewhere. That's the profit in the not-for-profit sector. But it's how can we move beyond financial investment. Like, financial investment in the third sector is crucial and it's key, and I've said this before, but the third sector can stretch a pound further than most. But you know, it's about those assumptions around consumers want companies that are committed to make the world a better place. That is not going anywhere in terms of environment, sustainability, and some of the bigger societal problems. So some of us are in this space because we've perhaps been given an opportunity to be in this space, but I suppose it's how maybe some smaller organisations can respond. And my view about that is probably those smaller organisations can respond far quicker without the bureaucracy of policy and procedure and everything else. So it's trying to find a space, but really this is about trying to drag as many businesses, no matter what size in the region, into the book of social action, and then seeing what the appetite is and what's the art of the possible. So I'm hoping that on the back of this, there's more businesses that are open to the idea of working with any of us in the third sector.
And COVID's definitely provided a platform for that. We've seen a huge number of businesses enter this space for the very first time. The challenge I would throw out to those businesses today is, will you still be there in 5 years' time? I really hope that you are. Don't retrench, don't go back to where you were. You've stepped forward, make that the start of what could be a fantastic partnership for the North East to make a huge difference.
So one of our audience member, Pat Richardson, has said that she's interested to hear about influence of shareholders in business. Appears that they often require consistent or higher returns. So obviously this links very much with what you were saying, Steve, about, you know, it does actually impact positively on your bottom line. And I would imagine this, obviously, you know, I know it's something that you've considered, Stuart, in terms of the work that Newcastle Building Society do. You know, how can you balance the profit with it? So appears that they often require consistent or higher returns, which push strategic issues relating to social or indeed environmental responsibility, water providers being an example, Pat said, down the priority list, and not just engage in knee-jerk small-scale actions to address local problems. And I think that probably also links to what Alison said. You know, was the knee-jerk related to COVID? We all recognise that there was a need. Do we all now go back in our boxes? So what are your thoughts on that? How do we make this consistent and get people really bought into this for the long term?
So Jayne, I did a little bit of homework over the weekend, largely because you told us to, but but largely, so I've come across Project ROI, which is a few years old now, but it was launched by Verizon and Campbell Soup Company in an effort to sort of work out this return on investment in terms of, you know, stakeholders and shareholders. And while the highest drivers for return on investment are providing high quality products and services, they have evidence that effective CSR practices can boost business performance compared to those businesses that don't engage in CSR. So, you know, I think it will be out there, but you just got to, I think you just got to, all of the work that's going on around the latest COP meetings up in Glasgow, the world is changing quickly. You know, people who invest in business, big businesses now, or any business, want to know that you're trying to make the world a better place. It's not just about the bottom line. But I just think if you go right back to, all of our product is probably our people who are making something or engaging with somebody. Let's just speak to them. There's an assumption. I'm confident there's an assumption around reducing turnover, around their commitment and engagement to work, around working for an organisation that takes some role in supporting its local community. And it's something that you have to take seriously. You can't, and then once you take the staff on a journey, you have to have some congruence with it. So it's not going to go anywhere. Those businesses that are looking beyond the next 3 to 5 years have to consider it. And there's so much good work going on in the third sector. But we could all do with just coming closer together and seeing where we are on the same page. And I do think there's just some shared value around comms and mission and IP and people. It doesn't, and, you know, cash is king, but that doesn't have to be the starting point. So I'm hopeful that people will pick up that conversation around where that shared purpose is.
Thanks, Steve. And
sorry, Alison. Yeah, it's also really important because people who are investing in businesses want to see this happen as well. So the businesses need it to happen. The organisations that are investing in it want to see it happen. The people that are working in the businesses want to work in organisations that have value. The consumers that are using those services and products want to see that value as well. It's an absolute no-brainer. You know, we really need businesses to consider the size of the resource and the influence that they have in this space, and to use the opportunity, as Steve's just described, to do something fantastic.
I think,
Jayne,
go on, Stuart,
just coming there.
Stuart's waving
Yeah,
his spoon, so this must be
he's
important.
waving a spoon, it's important, yes.
Sorry, yeah, I mean, actually, there is a point here, by the way. We're not owned by shareholders. We're a building society. We're a mutual organisation owned by our members, which is very different. And actually, I did some homework at the weekend. And in this instance, it was, what does mutuality say if I Google it? And in this instance, it said the sharing of a feeling, action, or relationship between two or more parties. And so we work on the basis of a feeling and relationship between people. And that our organisation, because we are owned by our members, are actually supportive of what we're doing. They continue to vote our board in and everybody else. We're in the most successful period of our time as a building society at the moment. So we are very successful as well. But what we aren't there is to maximise profit. So that's a slightly different organisation. And we're doing what Steve fully described earlier on as well.
It's interesting, isn't it? I suppose also, if you look at all of these, yes, sorry, Ivan, yes, sorry.
You must have had a great influence, because I was doing some homework at the weekend as well. And what I was reading,
you see, that's why we didn't come to you. Sorry,
but particularly coming at it from the future workforce and for organisations who are on this webinar as well, I stumbled across 2 or 3 reports that showed in the 70% and above of high proportions of millennials, they're looking at businesses where they can make a difference rather than professional recognition. Now, if you've got, and I'm obviously working in a college as well, so for organisations who want to remain attractive to the talent pipeline coming through, like Steve said, you're going to have to start thinking like this. Otherwise, you're not going to attract the talent into your business. And as I think Stuart said earlier on, once you get that talent into your business, then that from within is going to grow. And to the point around shareholding, I remember being at Northumbrian Water, where it was led by people influencing the shareholders to take a lower return. This would go back 10 years ago, in order to do things that were not related to the core purpose of the company at that time. It was just the right thing to do to enable the wider region to benefit.
I think that's really important, and I think if we look at this in the round and actually bring it back to the individual stakeholder in the organisation, being the employee, but also the shareholder or whoever the cross distribution is for. Because I was talking to somebody the other day who had experience with a member of staff being off every month on certain days of the week, and when they actually peeled it back, it was because they couldn't afford the bus fare at the end of the month. That's productivity lost. You know, at the end of the day, that is bottom line. So at a micro level for each individual stakeholder, as well as a macro social level, this is a really important economic issue. I'm going to just pause for a second so we can ask the audience.
Before you do, Jayne, can I just make one other point? The charitable sector is not exempt from this conversation either. I just want to be really clear about that, because actually in our own organisation 3 or 4 years ago, we refreshed our vision, and you can see behind Jayne, our vision is a fair society for all with lives well lived. But we got some challenge from our employees that actually we weren't caring enough about them. We were caring lots about our clients, our beneficiaries, and everyone was absolutely behind that. But we had fallen short in terms of what our employees want and our volunteers wanted from us. And we've completely revamped all of our people strategy now, and you know, we're much more focused on all of the people in our business, both internally and externally. So, you know, just a reminder that this isn't necessarily just about business and social value, it's also about charities and the social value that they're bringing.
And I think that really links to the point that we were discussing last week. The charities are businesses as well. They do employ people. They are economic bodies. And just to reinforce what Alison said there, we actually, our recent staff survey, over 95% said that they felt that the charity was actually adding value to their life. which is a massive turnaround from where Alison mentioned at the starting point, but there's still obviously a lot to do. So the question for the audience, to what extent does a company's active contribution to society influence your purchasing decisions? So this is you as a consumer or a customer of an organisation. To what extent does a company's active contribution to society influence your purchasing decisions? Is it the first thing you look at when you're going to make a purchase? Have you never given it a second thought? Or are you now realising that, oh, sorry, and the third is it's nice as added value. I do apologise. So it's the first thing I look at, it's nice as added value, but it's not the first thing that you think about, or you never give it a second thought. So if you could just post there, because we've talked about employees, we've talked about the sort of the broader society, but what about the impact on the bottom line through actually being more attractive to customers as a result of you being able to overtly demonstrate how you actually contribute to society? I think that's okay, that's great, and we have the results. That's really interesting. So 74%, it's nice to have. It's certainly 21% first thing they look at, and 5% never give it a second thought. What are your thoughts on that, Stuart, Steve, Ivan? Are you surprised at that?
No, I'm not surprised at that. I think, look, the reality is, if businesses aren't planning for this, you've got a massive blind spot. Like it isn't a surprise that the world needs help and our community has huge societal problems. So if a business isn't planning for how they can be part of a solution, then they're going to get left behind. I think that's the top and bottom of it. I think the more we're talking here, I think there's also a huge risk here when you think particularly around some of the big energy companies in the Northeast, particularly wind and electric, and it's those companies who are brave enough to take their logo off and say, look, let's not just throw some money at a problem and say we fixed it. Let's come together as a group of organisations and say how can we have the biggest impact. And I think that's one of the other risks with this whole CSR agenda, is that a company will say, well, we've invested X amount of pounds, we've done our bit, off we go and we'll sail into the sun. So I think there is a huge risk, and it'll take some really brave organisations or boards or leaders to say, well, how do we come together to challenge what some of our societal problems? But I do certainly take Alison's view. You're going to have to talk about it. If you're going to talk about it, you've got to be about it. And I suppose that's what everyone can do. They can look internally first and say, well, what does CSR look like for me and my employees and our product? And I feel, even that conversation puts your organisation in a far stronger position to ask those type of questions, because everybody will have something that's personally important to them. But I forgot what you asked now. I've just had a bit of a rant.
We were talking about the poll and the responses, and customer, to be a customer, I suppose pressure on the supplier, whoever that may be, whether it's a retailer, whether it's pressure on the supplier, is a way of actually driving people's organisations' heightened social contribution, I suppose. So I think that's probably where I was coming from. I think one of the things I was thinking about is the recent insurgents Alison mentioned just earlier, the insurgents in interest in environmental change as what you might class as the E factor in the ESG regulation. And although I wouldn't dream of saying environmental change is easy, it clearly is not. It's certainly something that you can set out an obvious to-do list. So there are things that you can do as an organisation to contribute towards environmental change. What about the S factor? What about the social factor in ESG? It's great to have something tangible there for us to hang our hats on in the ESG regulations. But in real terms, do you think we're at risk of leading to tokenism as a result of this?
I mean, that depends on how businesses respond to it. I mean, I'd really like to see all businesses, and when I talk about businesses, I'm including across all of the sectors, public, third sector, health sector, private sector, move this agenda from the corner of their business to the boardroom table, and for social purpose to be the big business's strongest asset. You know, our people, our communities, our beneficiaries, they are absolutely our strongest asset. So moving a corporate social responsibility policy from the corner to an active boardroom live discussion where we're constantly reappraising it, constantly thinking about our value, why we're here, what we're doing, societal problems, how we respond to them. That's absolutely got to be the way forward, because anything else is at risk of being tokenism. It has to be embedded in the way that it is in the businesses that we've got represented here today. You know, Gateshead College, Newcastle Building Society, Newcastle United.
Yes, I'm sorry, we do have a comment here, which I'm just trying to get up here now, which is from, I do apologise.
Jayne,
Yeah,
while you're looking for that, I was just
yeah.
while you're looking for that, I was going to make a point just about the previous poll. I'm like Steve, I'm not overly surprised, because I mean, decision making on your spending your hard-earned money is based on so many historical factors, on the brand of the organisation, your emotional connection to it, the value that you get from it. I think there's businesses that are, like I think Steve said, are going to be left behind, because you're starting to see those decisions being made now based on the societal, environmental impacts of those organizations. And there's numerous examples where companies and organizations can rapidly lose that loyalty when they either don't make steps forward, or they do something against what the society wants. So it's definitely something that's got to be on the agenda for business.
Yeah, well, I reckon that one. I believe that poll's gonna keep moving, and that 70-odd% is gonna go higher, it's gonna go lower, and it's all gonna split eventually. And I think for us as an organisation, so for example, if we were to just constantly drive down the commercial route, we'd have the highest interest rates all of the time for customers, but that would be the worst commercial decision for us as a business. However, if we're a fair business, giving fair rates as an example, and actually doing the right things over here as well, that's a better balanced business plan, I think, for us. And that's a way for us to think about it in a different way. We balance it well.
Yeah. And even if this type of social value isn't driving your decision to make the initial purchase, in my case, it certainly drives my customer loyalty. So it might be an added value in the first instance, but having discovered that company and having discovered the value that they're bringing, I'm much more likely to stay with them for the long term than I would be just simply making a commercial purchase.
There is actually a comment on here from Miriam Hart saying there are several companies she just refuses to purchase from on that basis. Sorry about the tech issue I just had, but I will now tell you about the comment that's being made, which I think is really useful. Hi there, this is from Caroline Preston. I lead on the Good Work Pledge for North of Tyne Combined Authority, which in its pillars of good practice includes social responsibility, fair pay, health and well-being, and so on. Our aim is to get as many businesses signing up to either its standard or advanced award. We are also building a community of good work for businesses to share ideas on this subject and support each other. It's a free scheme, and small businesses with no experience in this area can use the framework to find out what steps they can take to build a better business for their employees and their community, which sounds really positive. And that's something that is exactly what we're talking about. Where do you start with these things? I think the challenge is making sure that the business recognises as a business issue, something that they really need to be on top of. Any thoughts on that?
I suppose if you are one of those businesses that has a million things to do, and like, what you're going to stop doing to then take a risk that you're going to have an impact on your bottom line because you're going to start saving the planet. I think it's where do you start, isn't it? I think everyone can look internally at the energy consumption of their transport or food or recycling waste. Like, anything to do with the environment is probably a step in the right direction. But I think I just come back to the point, you either you're either going to do something at some point because you want to, or you're going to be forced to do something because the consumers demand that you do, because the competition will all take that route anyway, because it's just the right thing to do. And it's that, I mean, Hal mentioned it before, we can't not have any of these conversations without thinking about the impact of the pandemic, where, you know, people have been through a lot of change and people have lost a lot of things and people. So if it's not now, you know, then when will it be that everyone comes together or has a contribution or a commitment to doing the right thing for the local community? So yeah.
So if we were to say, you get what you measure, and we would say, right, as a group, we're sat here now in 2021. If we were to be sat here in 2026, what milestones would we have been looking for, and measures that we would be evaluating whether anything has changed in the last 5 years to know that we've made progress? What would you be measuring, Stuart?
Well, I think staff retention is an immediate one. So employee retention is an obvious one for us, and it is something we measure on the back of this. I think we've all got to be. However, we have all got to be able to measure the impact we're having on people. We've got to be able to measure it. So having impact reporting as part of what your business does every year is really important too. Now, what does that mean? It might mean the hours spent, but in our organisation, hours spent volunteering, funds provided to communities to help them means a lot. Probably, you know, we win awards for it as well, and that's really good because that helps you tell more of a story down the line as well. So, you know, Steve winning the recent award was a big impact for them, but allows them to do more good as well. That's really positive. And therefore, the things for me right now, I think it is a tough one though. How do you what measures would you put down that would tell you that as a region we're doing really well? It's a tough one.
I think that,
sorry, Steve.
Sorry, I think that the one that we can is around, definitely, I think I have a huge assumption that staff turnover rate would book those trends, in particular talent you don't want to lose. So we all lose staff, but there's the staff you just don't want to lose, you know, the ones your real talent. And I think if you were to speak to the staff, you were to ask them seriously about their engagement and their commitment to work, I think you would see an improvement in that area alone. And if people are more engaged and committed to work, you're always delivering better products anyway. So I think if you could, like, speak to the staff, and you know that's your gift to give. And if you've got dedicated staff who are fully resourced and committed, they're the staff who deal with all the problems and deliver amazing customer service. And I think that's all of our product. So I think if you start with the staff and their commitment and their engagement, I think over time, and by doing this properly, you would see a bump in your trend.
One of the things that we've been measuring for the last 12 months or so is staff NPS and employee NPS, as in working for us as an organisation with the promoters to others. And my own direct team, I've got around 200 people I directly look after, and our NPS currently is around 73, 74. That's in a scale of -100 + 100. And that to me is a pre-indicator to turnover. And I think that in itself works really well. And I can tell you that's moved significantly. And it's not just about the work we provide to them, it's what we do as an organisation.
I think I would jump in there as well. I mean, there's not a lot more, I think, to add with Stuart and Steve. One thing I get quite frustrated about is the pages of balance sheets and financial forecasts that we trawl over, and then maybe have a 10 minutes at the end talking about other measures in the organisation. And I think, you know, if I was to say where we're in 5 years' time, I would like to see both the same level of priority given in boardrooms and staff rooms, discussions around how sustainable we are financially, but what are we doing at the same level? Now, those measures, like Stuart says, I think they're to be evolved and developed. We can talk around some of the employee engagement ones now, and I think they will just evolve over time. But everyone knows what the cost to an organisation is of repeat hiring and people coming through the door. So if you can get that valued workforce who feel listened to, their ideas and what's important to them co-created within the organisation, I think, like Steve says, I think you'll be onto it.
And I'm going to go big, Jayne. So I would love to see so many businesses involved in this conversation that we leave our government with absolutely no choice but to have a sea change in policy that results in an increase in investment in civil society rather than the trend for downward investment right now. The idea that big society can replace the government's role in creating societies it's flawed. We need government to provide the funding, the investment, the infrastructure, the policy and the process that enlivens civil society. So I would love to see in 5 years' time that we've got so many businesses engaged in this conversation that it's absolutely impossible for this decline to continue, and that we have a reduction in inequalities rather than the increase that we have right now.
So in terms of developing mutual partnerships in social change, who blinks first? What do we do? Who should it be the charity sector reaching out to businesses? Should it be the business sector reaching out to charity? If we're not looking for leadership from government, you take my meaning, we're actually looking for the sort of bottom-up approach. And who blinks first?
We're all businesses at the end of the day, Jane. I think the key is we're all businesses, and actually we've just all got to be a bit grown up and start linking to one another. I mean, I've got a little meeting on Friday this week, and I started out by asking a few organisations to join us. We've now got, I think, 28 joining us in a room together on Friday, and there's a good cross section of businesses, charities, colleges, universities, and I think just getting those people in the room together is a good start. And that's on a slightly different subject matter, but it's actually could easily morph into the subject matter we're talking about today.
I think the one benefit, Jane. Oh, sorry, jump straight in. Sorry, Chair.
Go ahead.
The great thing about this region, define region as you want, but I put the Northeast region, and being an adopted Northeasterner, this region is a good size to get the key representative groups together to do this ourselves. And as Alison says, we can drive something here, come together, collaborate, overcome any issues that there may perceive to be, because this isn't a competitive issue. This is about us all bringing our collective diverse strengths together to do what is right for the region. And I think that's the starting point, and we can do that. We're a compact enough region to bring the key people in the region together to start something over the next few years.
And if I may, Jane, I'd love to say that what I would like to see is many more businesses working with and including the voluntary and community sector in their supply chains in the way that we've talked about today, because that helps the sector to be more sustainable, but it also speaks very loudly to community wealth building, which I'm something I'm really passionate about. Making sure that the money that we have in the Northeast is locked into the Northeast. We know that that's where it has its biggest impact. If we can keep our money, our assets and our resources in the Northeast of England by working locally, that will have a huge impact.
Thank you. Steve?
I suppose businesses are out profit and charities are out social impact. I mean, there's got to be a fit there, and the way the world's going, like we've already spoken, companies are going to get left behind. I think this is our mission, to try and help our communities in our own particular way, and it's just about mapping some real intent and purpose, and then just getting over the fact that it's the third sector or anybody else with that cap out asking for financial investment. There's so much more we can do to work together if we can just try and be part of a solution together. So I think I'm with Alison in terms of those companies who want to be in this space need to make a commitment. It feels like there's another network or another opportunity, because there'll be loads of shared value, and it's not about competition and duplication. It's about perhaps reducing some silo work and coming together strategically to say, actually, here's where we have some value, some people, some time, some resource, and what would it look like if we just took all our logos off and put that together? What difference would that make? So it is the art of the possible, but at some point someone's got to take the first step, haven't it? It feels like it'll be the third sector, it feels like it'll be the voluntary sector, but we'll see. Time will tell.
But I think possibly by creating these opportunities to be able to have a discussion. So this webinar series around the business of charity was intended to be that. It's about, let's start the conversation. And we've had 3 quite diverse conversations with real diversity on the panels as well. There is definitely a will to be able to do something more effective, working together and develop mutual partnerships. So it is a case of creating those opportunities, as Stuart mentioned, just creating those opportunities to do it. And you never know what's going to come out of it. You have to take a risk here, I suppose, to start this. So we need to think about how we're going to do that. I'm going to wrap up now because we're almost at 12. I really want to thank you so much for our panel, Stuart, Ivan, Steve and Alison, and to our audience for your participation in this webinar today. And some of you I know have attended all 3 webinars, so thank you for that, and I hope you found it to be as insightful and challenging as we have. I don't think we can allow a conversation to end here. There's a lot more to say. So we need to think about how we're going to continue this initiative, and any thoughts from you on how we might do that would obviously be really welcome. You can email me or contact me on LinkedIn, or email charity@citizens@gateshead.org.uk, or sorry to invite comments to each of our panelists, but I'm sure they're all up for a conversation if you would like to talk things through. We'll also produce a paper from the 3 webinars that we've had to sort of combine all of the sort of key points that have been able to have emerged from these conversations, and share that with you all, and obviously each of us do our bit to be able to make sure that that gets an audience. So the more people that see what's been said, the more people will be able to connect with that, and hopefully to be able to start to drive this change. Any final comments from any of our panel before we wrap up?
No, Jayne, thank you.
It's all been said. So I hope this has given you an inspiring start to your week. And thank you very much for participating, and goodbye for now.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jayne.